Starting recording. There we go. Right. Hello, everybody. I'm Jane Glassy. I'm locality lead for the early years team in Solihull. We've got a few of our area SENCOs and a few of our ISPs on the call. But today isn't about us. Today is about the other agencies that come in and support you. Before we start with them, I'm going to quickly do a couple of updates because that's what we always do in our SENCO briefings. So the first one we want to do is remind you now, Sarah's just given me the date, 2nd of December, to remind you that Inclusion Fund, the next Inclusion Fund closing date is the 2nd of December. Or is that the closing date, Sarah?
Yeah, so we were just saying last year it was a week you had before the panel, before the cut-off date, but that's moved, it's 10 days now because they need longer to get through all the applications. So just to be aware that the cut-off dates are slightly earlier this year.
So just a little reminder for those of you that are building up to an application, because I know it's our busiest panel of the year. It always is. It's when you've done all your graduated approach and you've all worked very hard at making sure you've got all your evidence and then you get your applications in. So make sure that's done. And the other one I want to remind you of is we're having a little bit of a push with our Makaton training. So anybody that would like Makaton training, we've got some online that you can book if you go onto our Soul Grid page, but we are also offering it in settings. It's still £30 per participant. And if you've got 8 to 10 people that want to do it, we'll come to you and do it. Or you may have a school or nursery near you that want to do it together, get enough together to do it. But please, we're trying to get as many as we can to have the Makaton training while we're still able to do it. And I think that was the only things I had to update you on, wasn't it? Was there anything else I mentioned? I can't remember anything else now. I think that was it. If not, I'll think about it afterwards. Right then, because Alison Keane from Virtual Schools was the person I can see online, and I know you're definitely here. Do you mind awfully if you're the first person that comes in and talks? What we're going to have today is we're going to have these people come in and just do a little bit of a talk around what they do, what their team's job is, and how they can help you, and how you can apply, and everything else that is you need to know about them. I'm going to stop talking for once in my life and let Alison start.
That's fine, Jane. Thank you ever so much. And actually, I don't mind if you need to talk to fill in some gaps. Please bear with me. It's been such a long time since I've delivered anything, never mind online. So I'm just going to see if I can share a little PowerPoint with you. Might be easier if I go to the PowerPoint. Fingers crossed this works.
Return the prepaid envelope. For any other queries, please.
Can you all see that okay? I've just realised that I was talking. Did everybody hear what I was saying before? But I just realised I was on my mic was muted, so I don't know how long it was muted for.
We can hear you now, so don't worry.
Okay, so I was just apologising. So hopefully that will work okay. It's been such a long time since I've delivered anything at all, never mind online. And actually, I wasn't expecting such a large audience today, so it's nice to see everybody.
Don't worry,
and thank
Alison.
you.
We're very informal. It's a very informal, nice group. So that don't be scared of us. I promise you, we're lovely.
That's fine, and I do recognise a few names and faces, which is great. I can see laptop saying can't display. Can anybody see the screen? Can anybody see the PowerPoint at all?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, we can see it, Alison.
Lovely, thank you. So there might just be a few technical issues. What I'll do is I'll make sure that you can have a copy of the slides. If I can organise that through yourself, Jane, would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
But what I'll do before I share them is I'll update them because I didn't realise that we're actually using a more up-to-date template in Solihull now than the one I've used. So I will update them and send them across to you, Jane. And actually what I'm going to do today is just a real whistle stop tour through what we do as a virtual school. If you're interested, and actually we'd really welcome more of you attending the training that's available. We did offer training solely for early years providers and early years coordinators in schools, etc. However, the numbers were really, really low. So lovely, thank you for sharing that. So it will also be available on SolGrid. What we're doing now is merging the training, so all training is available to all providers, so from early years into primary, secondary and including post 16. So if you'd like to know more, which I think would be really helpful, is to book onto the training, and the dates will be available through these slides as well. So I would suggest that as a next step. Okay, so as I say, I recognise some of you. I know that I work with some of the children in your settings, not directly, because that's not our role. Hopefully we'll cover some of those misconceptions for those who perhaps are less familiar with us. Okay, so with a virtual school, we primarily work with looked after children, but the remit has extended to supporting any child with a social worker. We don't all take on that role, and for those children who aren't looked after, it's more advice and guidance that's provided. So we are more directly involved with the children who have looked after status. Any other children with a social worker, we offer advice and guidance, but it's more anonymous. So, you know, we don't case hold for those children as such. And that's mainly our virtual school head Alicia Oliver Adams, who sort of leads on that. And we have a new member of the team, Bavita Williams, and I think that's an area that she will be supporting with as well. Okay, so each local authority has a virtual school, and it's the statutory role is the virtual school head's role. How big or small the team is and who the team consists of does vary between local authorities, and you may find that you may have already come across that by working with different local authorities, different virtual schools. Is, you know, we do operate slightly differently in some areas, and I believe we're probably one of the only local authorities who don't use the EPEP system. You may use an EPEP system for any children in from Birmingham, Warwickshire, etc. So we are one of the few who don't use the EPEP system, and we do have our reasons for that. Okay, so how the team operates is down to the virtual school head. She makes those decisions. So the main role is to make sure that school social workers, carers and professionals understand their responsibilities, and we work together with all of these people, and we start to work with children from the age of 3. So from the term following their 3rd birthday is when a child will have their first PEP. That's the point at which we will become involved. So they may already have been looked after for some time, possibly since birth in some cases, but we only become involved the term following a child's 3rd birthday. If you do have any children in your setting who you know are looked after, and you know they're turning 3, there's never any harm in actually reaching out to us and letting us know that you're aware that the child's turned 3, they're likely to need a PEP for the following term, because we do like to get dates in the diary as soon as possible. I know you're all well aware of how long it can take in some cases to coordinate dates between the social workers, yourselves and us, carers, etc., anyone who needs to attend the meeting. So the more notice we all have, I think it's better for everybody. So we continue to support them for as long as the child is looked after until the end of year 13, so into post 16. And I'll go through the team structure in a moment as well, so you'll know that they have that support from specialist workers at that stage. Okay, and we also have a remit for previously looked after children. So if any children are no longer looked after, cease to be looked after, either through a special guardianship order or they become adopted, or the care order is revoked, they're classed as previously looked after children. So again, we would only provide advice and guidance in that situation. They're no longer on our caseload. Having said that, if a child is likely to cease becoming looked after, we still like to hold, if there's a final PEP due, we still like to go ahead with that PEP meeting, just as a final, or it might be called an exit PEP, just to sum things up and make sure that carers, parents, whoever it might be, feels supported and knows what the next steps are, to be able to continue advocating for their child. Okay, I won't read through absolutely every single word on these slides because they're quite wordy. It hasn't come up very clear on my computer. I'm not sure what you're seeing on yours. I seem to have shared it through a live link, but I'm hoping that you can see the structure for our team.
I can read it, and believe me, it's normally me that can't, because my eyes aren't the best. So if I can read it, I'm hoping everybody else can.
No problem. Okay, I'm glad you can, because I'm struggling to see, and I'll probably need to do a little bit of work on this. So okay, so hopefully you can see the structure of our team, and the next slide says it a little bit more clearly for me. So we've got, as I say, Alicia Oliver Adams. Sorry about that, Verity, and anyone who can't read it. As I say, we'll share the slides with you. So Alicia Oliver Adams is our virtual school head teacher, so she's our manager. We have Jane Jones is our office and finance manager. We have two PEP coordinators, Julie Sanders and Viv Allison, and they are responsible for sending out the PEP paperwork, and making sure they can receive the PEP paperwork, sharing it with us, amongst many other roles. We have two careers advisors in the team, Kerry and Viv, and they will support from year 10 onwards, but there are many. Do apologise. So the PEP, somebody's just asked what the PEP means, and I will come on to that, but yes, I probably should have said earlier. So the PEP is the personal education plan. So every looked after child has to have a personal education plan in place, and that's reviewed on a termly basis. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a moment. So thanks for asking that question. So Kerry and Viv support with careers, and then can support sort of post 16 as well. As I say, we have a new member of the team, Bavita, and then we all have slightly different titles, but we're all really virtual school officers. We all do a similar job. So I'm allocated to early years children. So all early years children who are looked after to Solihull, whether they are remaining in the borough or moving outside and elsewhere, those are the children that I'm allocated to. And then you can see then we're allocated by phase. There are sometimes some changes. So I used to have early years and key stage 1. Now, as soon as children move into year 1, Jo Taylor will become allocated to that cohort. And then I've listed all of the names from key stage 1 onwards up to post 16. And we have a UASC, so unaccompanied asylum seeking children specialist, and that's Kate Duffy. And the year 11s, they're not allocated to one person, because there are quite a number of them, and things do become tricky in year 11. So they are shared between several team members to be able to support them. Okay. So basically, I mean, what would be easier is to share with you a day in the life of, and that's something that somebody who's recently joined our team, well, a year ago now, has actually suggested that we put together, because when she joined the team, she said she had no idea really of the range of things that we actually do. So people know us as attending PEP meetings. And essentially, that's what that is our statutory duty. We do have to attend one PEP meeting a year at least for each child. But our role essentially is to advocate and promote the education for all looked after children. And we adhere to the guidance in the promoting the education of looked after children and previously looked after children, as you'll see on the screen there. Okay, so as I say, we're a proactive corporate parent promoting and supporting education. So that's alongside, social workers, carers, the school, the setting, any other agencies who are involved in the child. We want to really strengthen the partnerships with other agencies. The more effectively we can all work together, the better it is for the child, as you know. Rather than everybody working separately. So we absolutely want to promote that. So we attend the personal education plan meetings, as I say, minimum of one per year. However, we do rate the children depending on complexity, depending on what the situation is. We look at them all as individuals, and if we feel that we do need to attend every PEP meeting, then we will do. So minimum is one, but we do we attend as many as we possibly can, and all PEP meetings for children who are rated red on our RAG rating system. And as I say, that can be for a number of reasons. So we do have a duty to ensure that all children have a PEP meeting every term, and that the PEP paperwork, so the personal education plan that you complete, settings and schools are responsible for completing the paperwork and sharing that with us in the meeting. But we do need to make sure that we receive that paperwork so that we can then quality assure it, save it to the child's file, and share it with, it's distributed to everybody who attends the meeting. We do monitor the progress and support accordingly. So we monitor academic progress, we monitor attendance and address any concerns. So we also commission a company welfare call. So those of you with looked after children in your setting, looked after to Solihull, you'll be familiar with daily phone calls from welfare call, just to follow up and make sure that children are attending, and then we can support accordingly if there are any issues with persistent absences, etc. Not so much of a concern with the younger children, but obviously we wouldn't want to miss anything there. And I know that the settings we work with would also inform us, I'd like to think, if there were any concerns, so that we could follow that up and address accordingly. Okay, so we do need to make sure that education is secured for all children. If a child moves to an adoptive placement, it may be that they don't start at a nursery straight away, but we do like to know that there's a nursery or a school identified for the child, so that we can then start working with that provision and supporting the transition as best we can. And also, if a child's leaving your setting or school, we like to be able to make some links so that you can liaise, and so that you can both attend the next PEP meeting if possible, just to make sure that that transition is as smooth as possible. But yeah, we do need to make sure that education is provided for all of our children right through the age groups. And of course, as I said, we offer a training programme to designated teachers. you may not be called designated teachers if you work in a nursery setting, but whoever, there does need to be a member of staff who's responsible for looked after children within the setting. And if you do have any questions on that, please feel free to ask. Okay. This isn't an exhaustive list, as I say, it's just an idea of other things that we might do. But generally, we do, apart from attending the PEP meetings and quality assuring the PEPs and monitoring the progress, etc., we follow up as necessary. So each case is individual, as you'll all be familiar with. But we just advocate for each individual child in whichever way is needed. We may attend their looked after reviews. Unfortunately, we don't have capacity to attend all of those. But that the PEP feeds into the wider care plan. So the PEP is a statutory document. And the IRO, the independent reviewing officer who chairs the looked after reviews, the CLA reviews, will be interested in whether a PEP has taken place, and they do like to see the PEP. They may need to draw upon that PEP for certain reasons as well. So we do attend where possible, but we can't always. As I say, I've said before, we support with transition. We follow up and support referrals, of which there are many. And I know that, waiting lists are very long. We don't have a magic wand. There's nothing we can do to sort of bump children up the list, but we will certainly try and support where we can to make sure referrals have been received. We may check on where a child is on the waiting list. So we will support you as a setting or a school, or the carers, parents, just to see if we can find out a little bit more information. And it may be that we do submit some referrals as well. We evaluate the impact of pupil premium plus funding, and I know in your case it will probably mainly be early years pupil premium. So we do discuss the use of early years pupil premium at PEP meetings, and we do expect to see, although we know that the uses are different and sometimes EYPP is pulled, etc., we are interested to see how that pupil premium has been used or is being used. Apologies, I'll try and speed up, Jane.
Sorry,
Okay.
Alison, I'm not trying to rush you too much. It's just that we've got people that are saying, "Oh, I can't stop." So we'll come back to you, I promise. Not that we don't want to hear you. No, that's
absolutely fine. And actually, as I say, Jane, it would be much better for everyone to attend, a longer training session to hear more. So I'll try and speed up. I'll skip through those next bits because those are just some other examples of how we support. Okay. Do you need me to go into a little bit more about what the personal education plan is, or do you feel as though you've got an idea?
Well, people asked about that, so if people aren't sure, if you can give them a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Okay, so the personal education plan is, as I say, it is led and completed by the setting or school. We can't go ahead with a PEP meeting without the school or setting present, because most of the information comes from yourselves. So we are interested in a general overview about how the child is doing in the setting or school, progress that they've made, and we recognise that they may be off track, they may not be achieving as expected, but we're also interested in the steps of progress that they are making against their own starting points, and also how you capture that. Are we seeing evidence of that, or does it say on every single PEP that they're off track and they're not achieving as expected? So the more evidence we can see, the better, the more helpful that can be. We're interested in the child's interests and strengths, the areas of learning that they gravitate towards, or what they like to do outside of the setting or school. So we do like to reflect the carer's view with that as well, and parents. And it may be that the parent is the carer in some cases and attends the meeting. It may be that parents attend PEP meeting even if they don't have care of their child currently. But we still like to take their views into account. It may be that they see their child at contact and are able to comment on what their child really enjoys doing at contact with them, or we may be able to give them some tips about what they could do when they see their child. So their involvement is really useful as well and important. We do like to have the child's voice captured. It's really important that we have the child's voice captured, and we provide a child's views form with questions for the child. However, as I always say, we don't want to force the child to sit down and answer questions. It's not appropriate for every child to do that. There may be some children who are non-verbal and communicate in other ways. So we appreciate any form of anything that you use to elicit the child's views. So as long as we capture the child's voice, that's the main thing. At each PEP, we set some targets, or you set some targets, depending on the child's next steps. Obviously, we won't have previous targets to review at the first PEP, but for termly PEPs following the first PEP, then we review those targets to see what has had an impact on the child and whether they've achieved their targets, whether we need to amend those, break them down further, etc. And as I've said, we include information about how EYPP is used for the early years PEPs. That's it in a nutshell. It does cover a lot more than that, and it does cover health information as well, which I know it is relevant. So the more information on the PEP and the more information that we have, we can support the child as a whole, really. So these are just some people who might attend the PEP. I won't go into that anymore. Oh, most meetings now are held virtually, so on Teams. We used to hold all meetings face to face, obviously prior to COVID. There are pros and cons, as you'll all appreciate, to holding PEP meetings on Teams. Some are held in a hybrid way because we do like to go out when we can and have a face-to-face meeting. So it may be that not everyone can attend face-to-face. It might not be appropriate for everyone to attend face-to-face and be in the same room as others. So again, we look at each meeting separately, and we can hold those virtually or face-to-face or in a hybrid way. I've talked a little bit about multi-agency working, so the more we can strengthen those links, the better. We do routinely work with social workers, the designated teachers, nursery managers and carers, the IROs, health professionals, as I've said, EHCP services and other SEND services in other local authorities. SIS we work with, and the EPs. And we do have network meetings with other virtual schools, and we do commission mentoring and therapeutic services for some of our children. I won't go through all of the challenges right now. However, I do think that the training is important for you to note down. So it's so small on there, you probably can't read it. So as I say, I'll make sure that you've got those dates. I will pick out a couple of key dates for you, though. There is, I can't see it on there. Right, there's a designated teacher training in January. There's also one in November. I'm going to forward those dates to you. But also a training session that might be of interest to you, if you haven't done it already, is the fetal alcohol syndrome training, FASD. Unfortunately, the recent training had to be cancelled. We don't deliver that, but we facilitate it, and it is excellent training. I'd really recommend it. It's now being held on the 30th of January at 9:30 via Teams, and I'll send the link across to Jane if you are interested in booking onto that. As I said, I'd highly recommend that training. There weren't enough numbers for that training to go ahead this term, so if you are interested, then that is free training. But as I say, you're welcome to attend any of the virtual school training that's on offer. But what might be of most interest is the designated teacher core 1 training. So if you are able to book onto that, that would be lovely. And you'll just hear a little bit more my rushed version. So these are our contact details for the virtual school office, and I'm more than happy to share my details with anybody if you would like them, so that you can contact me directly. Thank you ever so much, Jane. Thanks everyone, and as I say, if there are any questions.
And I'm really sorry it had to be a little bit speeded up. People have just said to me, I need to go in a little bit. So I was like, I've done it the wrong order, of course. It's typical that when everybody wants to be first. So I'm not going to ask for questions, but could you hang around for a little bit? Have you got time to hang around for questions at the end? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course, I can hang around, no problem.
Alison,
thanks, Jane.
I'm really grateful for that. So anybody, if you've got any questions about that, could you hold them for a little bit? Because Sarah from our speech and language team would like to go next, and she's going to have a chat with you. And I think, unfortunately, the OT might have to leave, so we might not get them today. But if they do have to leave and can't get back, so there's just something that's happened that they have promised they'll come back and we'll do it again at a different time. So you're not going to miss out. And I'm assuming, I don't know if Julia's here yet, but we'll have her as well. So Sarah, can I hand over to you next? I'm sorry,
that's all right.
Everybody.
You can absolutely. Do OT want to go first if they're still here, or have they left already?
Oh, I'm not sure. Helen, have you gone? She may have gone. I think there was a bit of a crisis happened.
Was it? Okay.
I have asked her. I said, I did say, if you've got chance, send me your PowerPoint and I'll go through it. But I don't know that she even had time to get that message before she went. So apologies. If she comes back, great. If she doesn't, we'll sort out another time. So Sarah, I'll leave it to you. Off you go.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much for having me, everyone. I'm Sarah Brunson. I'm one of the team leads in the Solihull Speech and Language Therapy NHS team. I also have a clinical load, and that's just for dysphagia, which is eating and drinking. So I will talk about communication as well today, but also a bit about the eating and drinking side, because I know that's a bit less known about for lots of people. So hopefully that'll be of interest. In terms of our criteria, you're probably all quite okay with it, but just running through quickly, please make sure the child that you're referring has a Solihull GP, unless you're in one of our early years named settings and work with Becky Gray and her team, and then they don't necessarily need that. They just need to be attending your setting. The other bits that are just really simple things to consider is making sure all of the paperwork is filled out. So something's hopefully written in each box and it's signed by the parent or guardian. Otherwise, we won't be able to accept it. So they're really, obvious things that we just will often say no to. We're quite open in other ways. So if there's anything that you're worried about in terms of communication, or obviously the eating and drinking side of things as well, we are quite accepting currently. If there isn't a clear alternative pathway, however, that's going to be much better for that child, we will just signpost the child to that pathway. So that's the other thing that might happen if we're rejecting something that you sent to us. Obviously, I've mentioned already the early years name settings. So if you know you're one of those settings, the SLTs have a bit of a different model. So they might be coming to you and supporting children up until the age of 3, and then if they still need support, they'll be transferred to the community speech and language therapist. So they'll still receive the support, but it will be through the usual pathways. The service for all the children that we see tends to be assessment and advice. So we'll see the child, we might do some direct assessment, some observation. They might come to us in clinic as well, so it depends what the difficulties are. And then we'll give advice and recommendations. If they're staying with us, it will include goals, and we may come out and do some coaching, either with the family or the setting, just to say these are the best ways to kind of work towards those goals before we see them next. There is still quite a long time before we pick up children, and also before we see children again if they've been kept on with us. So we're working really hard to reduce that at the moment. I'll have a look at the questions at the end. I can just quickly run through if there's time. In terms of the direction of the service, obviously we've just hired 2 new therapists, and we have another starting with us this week. So we're hoping just our capacity will mean that we're seeing children quicker. So that's the main thing that we're working towards. We also are sort of moving towards a model where we have a greater focus on upskilling the staff working directly with the child, rather than seeing lots of individual children and giving individual support. And that will be a slow, steady change. So you'll see some changes starting early next year. We've prioritised the early years. So we're going to be rolling out some groups for families who have children on the caseload with us already, or that have just been newly referred, and the child already has significant or complex communication needs. So those children will be prioritised, and be starting some of those more universal approaches to try and just see more children at once and support more families and more services at once as well. What haven't I covered? So sometimes as well, we may accept a child and just do one session, one assessment, and then discharge them into the care, or make a referral to a more appropriate service. That sometimes happens as well. So for example, a child with signs of selective mutism, you can absolutely still refer to us if you're worried about anything else going on with them. Sometimes it can be really difficult with those children to know whether anything else is going on, because they're not necessarily speaking in setting. So we can do some investigation, initial assessment, and then refer them on to a service that might support them a bit more with their anxiety or things behind what's going on for them. If I move on to dysphagia now, which is the eating and drinking side of the services that we do, we support any child with eating or drinking difficulties from when they're born, really. So if they're a baby, not if they're in hospital, so they need to be in the community living with their family, we'll support them from 0 to 18. And it can be really anything that's going on with their eating and drinking. So a lot of children will present with very fussy eating, and if the sort of variety of foods that they're eating is less than 20 different foods, we might be a bit worried about that, and we can just make sure that there's nothing physical underlying. And again, it's one where we can refer on if there's other services that are going to better support them, but we can do that initial assessment and just double check there's nothing else going on. If a child does have sort of physical swallowing difficulties, absolutely refer to us. So if you notice when they're coming to you whilst they're eating or drinking, they're choking, coughing, changing colour, their breathing changes, like difficulty catching their breath afterwards, if they sound like they've got a wet or croaky or bubbly voice after they've been eating or drinking, any of those things, you can refer to us, obviously with the consent of parents. I was just going to share some resources as well. So if I have a little look and see if I can share my screen. Let's see. This one. Hopefully you can see that. So this is our website. the majority of the pages have just had a bit of an overhaul. So if you go on to, if you just search Solihull SLT or Solihull Speech and Language Therapy, you can find our page. And if you hover over the speech and language therapy section, it will pop up with all the different pages we have under speech and language therapy. On this same website is OT and physio as well, so we are all in one place. But the resources for everyone page has some really nice new leaflets in lots of different areas. So early interaction, play, social communication, attention, understanding language, talking, speech sounds, bilingualism, selective mutism, making a communication friendly environment, stammering, voice, fussy eating. So lots of different areas that we cover. And each of those sections will open up a leaflet. You can absolutely share that with families. Each leaflet also has links that you can access either when you open it up online, or if you were to print it off, the families can scan a QR code on there and just access lots more information on the internet that's just a verified link really to more information they can have a look at in their own time. So there's plenty of things on there that you can go to first, either to be implementing yourselves in setting or sharing with families as well if they're worried. And then also on there, on the website, there's a dedicated section for eating and drinking. So if you've got any concerns or questions, I would go there first. And obviously our contact details, if you're still worried, to give us a ring and chat through anything, are on there. And the separate referral paperwork is on there as well. Because if you've got all our referral paperwork for communication and you think, how am I going to refer someone for eating and drinking? It's a separate referral. So you can just go on our eating and drinking page on there and download a referral and refer to us with that as well. Is there anything? Let me just have a look on the chat and see if there's anything I can quickly. Yes, I can send out a list of our name settings. I'll do that afterwards, Jane. I'll just forward it to you. Is that all right? Okay. Is there anything else anyone would like to know?
No one's got any questions? I thought when I spoke to Sarah the other day around the referral for the children that are fussy eating was an interesting one, because it's something I hadn't been fully aware of, the level of the children that were being referred there. So I think that's an interesting one to think of. But I think 20 foods is quite a small number of foods. So I think it's having that conversation. I think when me and Sarah spoke, we had the conversation around the fact that sometimes parents will say, oh, my child doesn't eat anything, nothing at all. But then when you unpick it, it sometimes is quite a lot more than 20. So it's that one. Oh, it's an interesting question coming through there. So it says, do they have to have had a hearing test before we can refer?
They don't, but it's often something I'll be keen to get families to redo. Vast majority of children will have had one in hospital. But obviously things can change as they get older, glue ear can develop and things like this. So if they get it sorted sooner rather than later, it's going to be much more helpful for the development, especially if the waiting times are long for us. If they get it sorted, you may as well just say blanketly, have they had a hearing test if you're worried about any sort of communication difficulties?
It's one of the first questions we ask. I've got somebody's hand up. Who is it? Oh, Alison, your hand's up.
Hi, thank you. Just regarding the looked after children, or any children who are sort of transient, if there is a referral in and by the time an appointment is offered to that child, I'm just wondering, in the case of a child who may have moved within that period of time, if there is no response to the appointment letter or offer, I'm just wondering what other processes are followed. Is anybody else contacted in that instance?
Yeah, so children who are looked after or have any social services involvement, we don't prioritise in the sort of way that we see them. Like, they don't make it further up the list, but what we do is keep them on if they're missing appointments, and we just inform the other professionals around them, especially the referrer. So we're most likely to go to the referrer to speak to them and say what's happened. And then if we need to speak to the school or anyone else to find out, we can. We have also a really great internal safeguarding nurse, and she sits with the hospitals. So she can also, she's got lots of links with everyone, social services, the police. So she can check basically where children are if anything's been happening and get back to us. So yeah, we do a lot of that follow-up for children that have any of those things that we know about. As long as we know about them, we do all of that follow-up. And basically the missed appointment becomes finding out where they are and booking in another appointment with them if we can, if it's still appropriate.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
I did have another question just further up about if children have a Birmingham doctor, what do we do? So if you're not in a named setting and the child has a Birmingham doctor or a Warwickshire doctor or anyone outside of Solihull, you need to refer to their speech and language therapy service. So again, I would just be putting into Google Warwickshire Speech and Language Therapy NHS. You'll be able to bring up their website and just follow the referral pathway on there. They all have their own referral paperwork that you just fill out. It will be different to ours, and then they should be picking them up.
I would say if we've seen the child and we're aware that they're in a different local authority, when we give the advice, if they're being seen by us, if you're not doing it before they're referred to us, then we would be saying to you, this child needs a SALT referral, and we would probably put a link on for you for the agencies that they're from, if that makes sense. So we might put a link on for the Birmingham speech and language team or whoever it was that they're with. So we tend to have those links. So again, if you're stuck, you can come to us.
Yeah, and
I would say Google it.
Yeah, you can Google it. If it's a school, somebody's just said one about a school child, it's more complicated because Birmingham especially have a different criteria to us, and it's still being worked through because they've just changed it. So they're not attached to the GPs, they're attached to the schools. So it does make it complicated, but you can always
cross-border is always complicated.
You can always ring us up and we can talk you through on the phone if you've had something rejected because they're in the wrong area. So we can always talk you through. It depends which area they're in, unfortunately.
I'm seeing hands again. Gina, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Sarah. It was just a comment, really, just to say that it's good to see that you're going to prioritise early years. We do make quite a lot of speech and language referrals. They get seen or assessed and then put on a waiting list, and we tend not to get any help at all except for the initial paperwork that you send out, which is quite generic. But it is good to see that you're there. And do you think that will improve
I hope so. Like I said, we're doing sort of multiple things at the moment to bring that wait down, obviously initial wait and the wait between appointments. So it includes changing the model of our service basically so that we can do more for more children at the same time, like that example I gave with the group starting after Christmas. And yeah, we're starting with some of the children that have been referred recently, so they're going to be the younger ones, and they've already got significant needs presenting. So those ones we're going to kind of scoop up and try and prioritize. And then the other side of it is we have more therapists. So we've just hired 2 and they're still in training, but we're ready to roll by the end of this year. And we've got another lady starting with us this week. So yeah, we're growing, and the model of service is changing, but that will be over time.
I think the issue is, Sarah, for us, what the difficulties, first of all, it would be nice to have your input and advice for ourselves and to know how you would like us to proceed on the speech side with these children who may have complex needs. But the also is, if we happen to refer further on, to have your expertise backing us up on what we're saying about these children would be really useful. And we miss that because we don't get that anymore. We haven't got those reports from you, and it makes it just would be further help to back us up. So that's one of the things that we're missing now that we used to get that we're not getting anymore.
Yeah.
So
my hope Yeah, I understand what you're saying. My hope is that by changing the model, we're better able to, you know, support the children that really do need it. I think that's it. That, you know, and we'll be much freer to do that in the future.
Brilliant. Right, thank you. And I think I've got another hand up, but I can't see who it is. It says AD. Oh, Amanda. Amanda, you got a question?
Hi, sorry, it's only I put the question in about the Birmingham referral, so it wasn't about referring to Birmingham. We've had a child who requires further SALT support, but obviously because of the balance system in Birmingham, they're based in schools, but because we're a Solihull school, they're not able to offer any support at the moment. Where do we go, sort of knowing that they need more help, but we're a bit stuck and nobody ever answers the phones?
Oh no. Have they got an EHCP?
No.
No, they don't. Okay. It may well be a case of requesting information from the service about the specific child. If you email, try emailing, because obviously when you're ringing, all the therapists, including myself, you know, have days where they're out of the office doing assessments. So I would probably recommend emailing, and I'll send Jane the email address you can email for any queries like that about specific children.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, I'm really, really grateful for that. That's really helpful. And I'm now going to ask Julie Pierce from the speech. No, sorry, Julie, you're not from that. From the CIS Spy team, who's going to come and talk about their work that they do. So, are you there, Julie? I know you are. You put it in the chat.
I am there, and it's my understanding I'm talking about the complex needs team today.
Yes,
is that right?
you
Or
are.
would you like a bit of an overview of the Spy team as well?
While you're here, if you can tell us a little bit of the Spy team so that people know, if that's okay, and I'm not just dropping you in it, I'd be really grateful. But both would be great. Thank you.
So we're part of CIS, Specialist Inclusion Support Service. We're the sensory and physical impairment team. So that's made up of teachers for the deaf, so QTODs, qualified teachers of the deaf, qualified teachers for children with vision impairment, QTVIs, teachers for children with physical difficulties, and then myself as QTMSI, which is qualified teacher for children with multisensory impairment. So that's a difference or a loss to the way a child uses their vision and hearing. So the first thing I'll talk about then after that is about the partnership that we have with the NHS. So the NHS have a thing called the complex needs team. So if you refer a child to SAS, you may have seen on the form, you have to state whether you're referring for an autism assessment or whether you're referring for a complex needs team assessment. So I sit within the complex needs team as that partnership between health and education. So I'm just going to put something up now so you don't just have to listen to me. So the complex needs team is made up of 5 areas or 5 professionals, basically. Let me just share my screen so that you can see that. Can everybody see that? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So to refer to the complex needs team, the child has to be under 5 and they have to have 5 areas of moderate to severe need, meaning that they require all 5 professionals. So they must require a paediatrician, a physiotherapist, a speech and language therapist for communication and or dysphagia, and an OT, occupational therapist, so difficulties with those everyday living skills, and myself as a teacher of multisensory impairment. So we have a policy within our team, if you like, that any child who's referred to the complex needs team is seen by the QTMSI first, so that we can look at differences to functional, vision and hearing, because a lot of the children that you guys come across and we all come across is a child who may not have a vision impairments, they may not have anything structurally different with their eyes, they may not, and their hearing, they may not have any structural differences to their ears, but actually what we're seeing is a child who has significant differences to the way they process visual information and or to the way they process auditory information. So when a child comes to the complex needs team, they've often got a very complex neurology. They may have had a traumatic birth, an insult to their brain at birth. They may have a complex chromosome deletion or duplication or a syndrome. We've got rare leukodystrophies. There's a real wealth of complex needs that we have referred to us. But what we do know is that all of those differences, as in the reason why they're being referred, can impact on the way their optic nerve and or their auditory nerve works. So we like to have that model where children are seen in the complex needs team by myself first so that we can look at how they're using their functional vision and or hearing. And often it's both, but sometimes we're just looking at both and then seeing one. Seeing maybe there's a big difference with their vision, not necessarily so much their hearing, but then as the child develops, we may see that there are differences to both. So that overview to begin with is really important of the functional way the children are using their vision and hearing. But just go back to, I'm just going to go to this leaflet now. This is the leaflet that we give out to new parents when they're referred to the complex needs team, and it just gives a little bit of an overview about what everybody does. But it was, if you look at the bit where it says MSI specialist teacher, we carry out assessments of children's functional vision and functional hearing. They're made through observations, targeted assessment frameworks, and they're made in various ways through various visits. And we look at the way your child's development around the use of the senses is happening. So if you're thinking about referring a child to the complex needs team, if they don't need one area, if they don't need physio or they don't need OT, SALT, whatever it is, the referral will not be accepted. So when we sit down on a Wednesday morning prior to the multidisciplinary team assessments that happen every week at Chelmsley Wood Primary Care Centre, we screen any new referrals. So, for example, if we see that a child is ambulant, they're an independent walker, or their walking is perhaps appropriate for where they are. So let's say they're a premature baby and, you know, they're whatever that is, but their walking is making good progress, then it could be that that's the reason why the referral is not accepted. The same for speech. If they are, you know, there's intentional communication, there's babbling, there's sounds, and that's appropriate to their age, then that could be another reason why they're not accepted. So they have to have that moderate to severe delay in all of those 5 areas to be screened and accepted. And going back to what Sarah was saying, they have to have a Solihull GP. And back to those cross-border complications, we have children that come to a complex needs team with a Solihull GP but live in Birmingham. So I can't get involved with those children, or very rarely get involved with those children. And then we have children who have a Solihull GP but are in a Birmingham setting. So there's complexities there as well with us visiting Birmingham settings. So because it's an NHS model of practice, the cross-border working issues can be quite complex. So if a child is screened and referred, screened and accepted rather from that referral, then we have a process where, first of all, we would make contact with the parent and say that this has been accepted. And then one of us would be taking the developmental history for the child by going out to the house and visiting the family. That developmental history goes back to the clinic, and then we book them in for a multidisciplinary team assessment slot. Even though there might be a wait between that developmental history and that MDT slot, the children once the developmental history has been taken, the children are then on caseload. So our individuals' visits to the family as professionals may start instantly, even though the MDT slot might be a bit of a wait. So if you've come across a parent where they've said, oh, you know, we've had a letter, there's a wait, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a wait for the service. It just means there's a wait for the MDT, if that makes sense. So once they've been referred, we pick them up and we start making those home visits and getting to know the family ahead of the MDT. And for me, that would be starting to look at them in their home environment, their preferred environment, and starting to look at the way that they are using their vision and or their hearing. I often work jointly with the speech and language therapist, Christina Fletcher, because if she's advising around communication and there's a vision impairment and or a hearing impairment, we need to make sure that our advice obviously has a cohesive approach to it. And the physio and OT will often make joint visits as well, because that's the other two areas that complement each other. So the speech and language therapist is Christina Fletcher. The OT is Michelle Kelly, and we've just appointed a new physio who started last week, and her name's Sam. I'm afraid I don't know her last name. The paediatricians who support our team are either Deepak Parasuraman or Dr. Ghazi. So we have a spread of two paediatricians over the team. So we'll start meeting the family and then we'll invite them to clinic on a Wednesday morning for an MDT. And we'll often have a lot of professionals say, can we come, can we come, can we attend the MDT? And if we say no, that is because we are trying to keep this a safe space for families. And what we don't want them to be is overwhelmed by there being too many people in the room, when there's complexities, such huge complexities around diagnosis, and obviously a lot of our children are life limited. We don't want them to be then having to have students, different faces, lots of unfamiliar people in the room all at once. In our experience, it's just too much for the family. And they benefit much better from it being kept to the smaller team. So if we ever did say no to you attending, please don't be offended, because that would be the reason why. But at that MDT, it will be all five of us in the meeting, looking holistically at the child and setting targets for the child. Following the MDT, each child will have a report, which we aim to produce within 6 to 8 weeks. Now, I'm just going to mention the report, because if you go to the bottom, you will see that there are outcomes, targets for each child. So if you've got a child that's come into your setting and they're under the complex needs team, it's a good idea to straight away get a copy of the complex needs team report, because then you can, when you're working on the child's targets, you can see what the SALT's saying from that report, you can see what the OT is saying, the physio is saying, and what I've said as a teacher. It's all outlined there in the report for you. And I think Jane and I have had this recently with a setting, haven't we, Jane, saying, well, we don't know what's happening. And we've said, like, you know, we work differently, or I work differently to the way the early years team work. And for some children, it may be that most of my input has been into the complex needs team report and not into blocks of interventions or personal plans like the early years team. So it's just a different way of working. I'll just go back to the leaflet just to show you what the other professionals do. So every child will also have a case lead on the team. So that will be a health professional. That's never me. But the good thing is that we see each other every week and we all work together. So if you were out, you know, in one of your settings and you were struggling to get hold of somebody, you can always email me or one of us, and we can generally get hold of each other if you've got queries. So quite often I'll be the go-between for a paediatrician or for let's say the OT in those questions and finding out answers for the family. The physiotherapy will look at how to meet the child's physical needs and develop physical abilities through play. and they'll also support them in the community. The occupational therapy support to participate in everyday things such as care and leisure activities, and often it's those functional hand skills that the OT is looking at. We get a lot of children who aren't able to use their hands, so we look very much at how to develop that hand use in children. And the speech and language therapist will work across both areas of dysphagia and communication, and they will come out and do dysphagia assessments. And also, like I said, we will work jointly around communication with the speech and language therapist, bearing in mind those hearing needs and the physio needs. The hearing needs and the vision needs. This is a little overview of the CN pathway. So this is really for the professionals, but the child is accepted, and then the developmental history is taken, initial appointments booked. If the child requires it, the MDT slot, case leads appointed, and then move to the waiting for an MDT appointment. But like I said, all professionals are involved, and also any risks around the family are identified at that time, because often we are the first people in our team who are visiting that child at home, and we sometimes pick up referrals straight from the hospital, so we may be the first professionals visiting the home, full stop. So you can always liaise with us as well if there's any risks around that home or that family. And then the assessment phase is where we're working individually, and then we have that MDT as mentioned. When each family leaves the MDT as well, they leave with kind of a handwritten overview of what our tasks are immediately prior, following each MDT. And although those are formalised into the report, sometimes if you've got a family and you just want to see what we've said prior, following that meeting, the parent will have a copy of that kind of overview of the meeting that they go away with at the end of each MDT. We then aim to keep up those visits in between each MDT. So each MDT is every 6 to 8 months. And in between that, we are doing those individual visits. We are working in the home and in nurseries. And there's a few familiar faces on here from nurseries that we've been into. And you'll know that we will be involved in things like supporting equipment purchase. So if a child is coming into setting, the OT or the physio, depending on who's responsible for seating, is able to mirror that invoice for the seating, whatever is provided at home for the setting, take that to the equipment funding panel, assuming that higher needs funding is all inclusion funding is already in place. Then it goes to the equipment funding panel, and the money goes straight into the settings budget to purchase that equipment, following the invoice that the OT or physio has given for the individual child. And that's quite common for most of our children. Most of our children going into PVI settings do need that sort of specialist equipment setting. So going back to the pathway, so it's every 6 to 8 months. And then I guess the other thing to say is the discharge criteria, when we would no longer see a child. So we would say that we would no longer see a child, and that's not quite up to date. So I'm just going to show you this one because this is more up to date. It's just very small, but can you see it? If we discharge a child from complex needs team, it's because they no longer need support of all of the team. So that could be that for example, they've started to walk, so they no longer need a physio, or they no longer need the OT because functionally they're using their hands and it's age appropriate. So those can be reasons why we discharge when they no longer need all of us. Or they've started special education provision after they've turned 3. There's a slight caveat there because one setting in the authority has 2-year-old places and the other side of the borough doesn't. So there's a bit of an inequity there. And we were saying that it was blanket across all children, whether they got a 2-year-old place or they didn't, that we stayed with them until that N2 year, and we discharged in the December of that N2 year, even if they'd been in specialist provision for their N1 year. That's currently, obviously, everything has an impact when it comes to money and caseload. That's currently up for debate because the other flip side of that is they are in specialist provision and they have got their M1 place, and so they have got access to therapists on site, etc. So that may not be the case for much longer. Or the other reason for discharge is because the child's turned 5 or is about to turn 5. And so that's an automatic discharge. And sometimes if we pick a child up and the referral is like 4 years and 6 months, then we'd have to question whether it would be worth us getting involved or whether we're better doing a discharge straight to community. If we do discharge, often there are services that we're then referring to in the community. So it might be that the child still needs SALT. So we may be referring to Sarah's team, for example, or they may still need physio, but no longer need OT, no longer need SALT. So those community referrals are often part of the discharge process for us. And I think that's everything about CMT. Has anybody got any questions? Nope.
That was great. I've learned things, and I've been around for a very long time. So I think it's just really useful to have that laid out, that criteria, which I think sometimes can get confusing because we have our criteria as well, similar but more your criteria. So I think that's really useful. And I think one of the things that we sort of get confused about, and I know other people have done, is that role and the spy team role, which because you work under the spy team, but then you're part of a separate team, which is the complex medical team. So it's lovely to hear that being laid out really clearly.
And I think these children will be rare, but for example, we've got Gina from Little Owls on the call, who did have a very complex young person arrive at their setting. It was very much, you know, what happens now sort of thing, although that was different because it's slightly different because it was a Warwickshire child. But there are these very complex children that, you know, I mean, everybody's caseload has got more complex, you know, that's a given, but that these incredibly complex children who do require such a high level of support, you know, often we might be thinking of more of our profound and multiple learners that, you know, are going to be in private, voluntary, independent settings if that's what parents want. And I know, Jane, we've had a few conversations recently about a few learners that we're sharing because they're in your PVI settings but are under the complex needs team and or on my caseload. So yeah, we do
talk we do talk a lot, but also it's remembering that Julie's team is around supporting the family, the child, telling you about that child's needs. We're still here as an area SENCO to support you with how you be the SENCO in that situation, what you need to do. So we can still give you advice. It won't be specific to the child's needs, but it will be specific to being a SENCO. And we do that. We did that with Julie as well. So we talked to Julie about what is, you know, a SENCO should and shouldn't be doing. What's the law? That's what our job is. We talk about the law a lot. So, you know, we're very much there to support you and help you get the funding that you need, the support that you need and around that. So we can help you with those. So don't think if a child's with Julie's team, it doesn't mean we can't help you with the processes, because we can. Although I'm not going to start telling you what the child needs, because that would be very much somebody else's role. So I've got no questions around that. I'm going to ask a question. Do you have children that are not on the complex, I think I know the answer, not on the complex medical pathway, but are being supported in your role, SIS role?
Yes, but it's rare. It is rare. I think when I did a count up, this is going back about 2 years, I think my caseload was 52 children. I think 38 of those had come through the complex needs team pathway. Obviously, a lot go into specialist provision. Most of my children will go into specialist provision, and some will go out of borough as well. That's quite common. So at the moment, children that I'm supporting in a mainstream setting only, so MSI children in a mainstream setting, I've got 2.
Wow.
That's a mainstream post nursery. Sorry, so I've got children.
That doesn't include our nurseries. That's school.
No, that's just right, children in mainstream school settings. I've got quite a few in your nursery settings.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought 2 was quite low.
No.
I was thinking, oh,
yeah. So I guess when you think of SIS, we think more of schools, don't we? And I know that's not quite. So in nurseries, yeah, we have a lot more in nurseries, and currently with the intake at Reynolds Cross, that's been a big impact, because we've got 2 children who were identified as requiring specialists but didn't take up specialist places. And I guess, like a lot of you as well, we've also had children that have got EA specialist name by type on their plans, but have ended up in mainstream hubs, kind of non-funded ARP provision or non-additionally resource provision that the schools have had to create.
So the politics around that is complicated. I know we've got people on that know a lot about this, because that's what they're having to do, but we know that there's lots of, so I don't know whether some of you know that over the other side of the borough to me, the Reynolds Cross special school haven't got a nursery provision last year and won't have again this year, and it's due to their building. Their building, unfortunately, is crumbling, and they're unable, it's unsafe to have a nursery provision. They're looking at what they can do about that. So it has had a big impact on both your team and our team, I think, with that provision of specialist placements. If there's no more questions for Julie, I'm really, really grateful for you. I'm guessing that Helen hasn't been able to come. Oh, another question. Sorry, is it Siobhan?
Hello, I have typed it in the box just because it's quite loud in here, so I probably can't speak out loud.
Right, do you want me to read it then? It says, we've got a child in nursery, 3 years, who's under my team, but meets the 5 areas as described. I know who you mean. He's a Birmingham child, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's a Birmingham GP and a Birmingham child, so no, he wouldn't go to Julie. I know exactly who you mean, which is why I've still got him.
No. Yeah, it does sometimes happen that we do say, you know, if you've got a Solihull GP, you can get that referral, because a lot of practices have that joint provision, don't they, for Birmingham and Solihull as well now.
He's a little boy that's already got an EHC. He's had assessments in Birmingham.
He was turned down for his Birmingham EHCP, and we've got a re-refer.
So it's not the child I'm thinking about then?
No, he's a little syndrome, and he was turned down for a Birmingham EHCP, so we need to re-refer. So just as much.
I know the one you're talking about. Sorry, I was thinking of a different one.
I'm just trying to put as much in place as I can, so I thought I would ask.
No, he's Birmingham with a Birmingham GP, so I don't. I'm set. Julie, am I talking for you? We're saying no.
No, it'd be no, just a flat no if he's a Birmingham GP. Yeah. However, if he's got differences to his vision and hearing as the 5th area of need, then Siobhan, you know, you can always refer to me. You do it quite a lot. I often turn you down, but I'm always happy to come out and have a look.
I like to keep everyone busy, you see.
I would say in that case, do that referral, because you're after all the evidence you can get for this young man at the moment. So yes.
Yeah, and because it's in a Solihull setting, we can evidence that for you. But yeah, not the complex needs team, unfortunately. That's where the difference is between the health and education partnership.
That's a bit I want everyone to hear. That's the difference between the complex medical team and the SPY team. Okay, so that's really useful for people to hear again, because the bit where I think I get confused, I know you don't, Julie, but I get confused around that, about where the difference lies. So that's a useful example of a difference.
Yeah, so they'll take anybody with a Solihull GP. That's it, simple as. Doesn't matter where they're educated, where they live, what school they're in, they will take them as long as they've got a Solihull GP. SIS are an inclusion service just for the authority, just for Solihull. So even though I've got one foot in the complex needs team, I'm still only able to work with children that either reside in Solihull or attend a Solihull setting. So there are children on the CM caseload that I never see, and it's inequitable because they then don't get that 5th area of need. They don't get that teacher involved in their assessments, which I feel quite strongly about, but you know, there's not much I can do about it.
What's my phrase? I always say to those of you that I work with, I don't defend our systems, I explain them to you. You know, that's the reality. I explain what the systems are, and that's what we're doing today. So, right, I am really, really aware that Julie Keane has been fabulous and waited for us to ask if there's any questions from her. So, are there any questions? Do you want to stop sharing, Julie, for me, please? And then where are you, Alison? You've got anybody got any questions for Alison, because she's been a good girl and waited? I think the reason being is that it was just such a good presentation. There was no questions because you were so good, even though I rushed you and I would feel really rude for that one. So I'd just like to apologise again, Alison.
No, absolutely fine, Jane, and I should have probably checked really whether that was too long.
No, it wasn't that it was too long. It purely was. The only reason I panicked a little bit is that, as I say, lovely OT lady is going to, you know, send me a PowerPoint, and we are going to try and share it with you. But unfortunately, she had a little bit of crisis and had to go. And she said, "Oh, can I go next?" But I'd already started you off. And so that was where the problem was. It was my fault. I wasn't monitoring what I was doing. And so if I'd have popped her in first, she might have been able to do it for us. I promise you we'll get OT to come and talk to you. I've got hands going up. Oh, Sarah.
Fine, Jane. I was just going to ask Alison, do you know when you showed all those lovely training courses, and the fetal alcohol, I think, is a brilliant one to get people to go to, and there was trauma and attachment. And I'm a big advocate for spreading training around trauma and things like that in our settings. I just wanted to check, who were those training open to? Is it for PVIs as well as schools?
Absolutely, anybody is welcome to attend the training, and that's beyond settings and schools. So yeah, anybody who's interested is welcome. We'd you know, as you say, it's important to spread the word, and we'd love to see more people attend.
So please, I would strongly recommend them myself as well. So please, can you get on those if you get the opportunity? It'd be absolutely fabulous. I've got another hand going up. Is it Verity? I can see V. Is it Verity? If you've got your hand up.
Hello, Jane. Yeah, sorry, this is totally non-related, but my son would like to say hello to Mr. David. Ben Compton from the previous class.
There we go. We've said hello.
He's at A&E with me in a minute, so we've just realised who she is.
Oh, bless.
Okay, lovely. No worries. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. Thank you very much for that. Oh, we've got people saying, can we have the link?
Yeah.
Could you put some links into the chat for the training? That would be great.
Address in the chat. I don't know whether that's the training link that you would normally use, but that's the link to book on to certainly the FASD training.
be brilliant.
And I will send.
If not, come back to me and I'll chase Alison for some links for it. So I always say, come back to me. Any questions that we're stuck with, come back to me. And then I'll chase people for it. Right, the last but not least, the thing I wanted to remember is we don't normally do this. We don't normally have 2 SENCO briefings in a row, but unfortunately it was the only time we could get the next person to come and speak to us. So next Monday, I think I'm right in saying, we've got another SENCO briefing on the impact of premature birth. And we've got a lady coming in who's an expert on it that's going to come and talk to us. So I'm just doing a little bit of an advert to you, saying that might be really useful for you to pop along to. And again, we will record it if anybody can't, because I am aware that, you know, ratios and trying to get out is often difficult. But if you can, it's something we've been trying to get for a long time, because I had some excellent training a few years back about the long-term impact of prem birth that people sort of forget. It's one of the questions when I come in and I say, anything I should know about this child, you know, is there anything like, you know, in their background? One of the things I'm asking about is, did they have a significantly premature birth, because that can have serious impacts on development, obviously. So that might be a useful one to come along. I'll send out the can please resend out the link. Yes, we will be doing a quick resend of everything about that one as soon as this one's finished. So I'll be nagging all your area SENCOs to go and send it out again, going, let's jolly people along to that one. Any last questions? If not,
is that going to be on your SolGrid page as a recording?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's what's her name? Pinky. Is it the name Pinky? Am I making that up? Can't remember the name of the lady now. But it's one of the ladies. I think she's either a paediatrician or a consultant that's going to come and talk to us about it. And I've been trying to get her to come out and do it for about a year now. So I'm quite pleased that we've got it. So I'm going to stop recording, because I think that's always a good thing to do. If I can. Maybe I won't. Come on. Eventually I'm going to stop recording. Maybe I've stopped. I may have stopped recording. I'm not 100% certain. But
Jane,
I'm going to say...
Sorry, can I just say we're having difficulty at the minute putting these recordings on the website, so people may need to just be patient, and but we hope to get them up there as soon as we can.